Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com.
Hello and welcome to SciTech Culture. My name is Ben Warner and I'm joined once again by my good friend and colleague Steve Kern. How are we today, Steve? I think we're now into summer now. It's a little bit more humid these days though, isn't it? We're used to more of the dry summers, but I guess things change over time, don't they?
That's right. It's hot and humid here, and we've got a test match on, so it well and truly is summer.
Absolutely. So I wanted to start quickly with Apple again, touching on a topic that we covered, I think, a week or two ago. And now I've got my my new 2018 MacBook Pro, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed that it's going to be recording this podcast. I guess we'll know eventually. And if you don't notice the difference, then you know it's done its job. But the interesting thing is, obviously, it's a very modern design. I'm happy that I hung out for a couple of generations of it later. Like, the old adage of never getting the first version of it, I tend to find helps. But I just wanted to touch on, again, this idea, which I think we covered previously, but now I'm sort of practically seeing it in front of me, which is because of the choices and the decisions that they've made about what to put out there in terms of their product line. Like, I could have done without the touch bar, for instance, on this laptop, but I couldn't get a laptop that had all the guts that I needed unless I got the one with the touch bar. I would have loved to have gotten the MacBook Air, for instance, because to me, I find that wedge design better, because if I'm doing typing on it, it's a bit more better for that. Not that this one isn't, but it's just one of those things. And I just want to touch on again, like, why is it so difficult for them just to provide? I guess the short answer to that is that if they did that, then you wouldn't be buying what they want you to buy.
Yeah, and look, there's two ways to look at this. Apple's always made you buy what they wanted you to buy because they knew what you wanted when you didn't. But to probably I guess stick on the theme that we've sort of followed a little bit in the last few weeks is I'm no longer sure that Apple actually knows what you want before you know. And that's why we see these products where for the first time ever in Apple history, you're buying stuff that you don't think you need. That's weird for Apple.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, having said all of that, I mean, it's obviously it's a really good laptop, obviously, so I'm not knocking it. And just for our purposes, although none of you would know this, the old MacBook would be its fans would be kicking in right about now, because recording the podcast tends to push it a bit more. I'm not actually hearing any fan noise, so I'm going to have a better time in the editing bay with getting the audio sort of cleaned up. It'll be less of an effort, which is really good.
And that's a good point, Ben, because we're used to Apple taking things away. Like taking away a floppy drive, taking away a button or a DVD drive or something like that. So when they add things, you really expect that you're going to be using them.
Exactly. And of course, I'm in dongle world, of course, which isn't too bad, because I think I'll only be using it during our podcasting or any other type of production type of use, I guess, because most of the rest of the time, as I was finding even with my old MacBook, I wasn't really using the ports that much, which is testament to the fact that I think we're moving more towards a wireless future with a lot of this stuff.
So true. How much did the dongle cost?
Yeah, I'm embarrassed to explain how much that cost, but it did add to the cost of the machine, unfortunately.
It's only an $80 accessory from Apple.
Yeah, well, actually, it's not from Apple. They don't sell one that had all the ports I needed, but which is interesting. They sell a cable for each version, so you.
Of course they do.
So you'd have to have like 10 cables, whereas I wanted it just in a hub. But it's hilarious, I guess, with all that sort of stuff. And The other thing I just wanted to mention too was you take a deep breath when you swap out a production machine. I think when you're just using it for personal use, you can get by, but when replace one of your key components to doing something like this, the first time you do it, and I'm trying, to remain calm while we're recording, is that it's going to do what it should be doing.
And just on that, Ben, did you actually transfer all your settings and data using whatever they use now, iCloud or Time Machine or whatever it is, from your old machine to your new machine, or do you just start fresh?
So I just started fresh. I mean, effectively, it's the same as the old one. It's just that I set it up from scratch as opposed to transferring everything over. That was just to make sure that, not that I think it really matters in the Mac OS world, but I don't know, maybe it's a holdover for when I used to do Windows, that you want to start fresh with the operating system.
That's it. You don't want to download a whole lot of settings because you'll never find out which one's wrong if something goes wrong.
Exactly. Alrighty. Okay, we'll move on to our next topic. This one caught my eye because obviously I think there's always been some scuttlebutt about Huawei, and their maybe motivations around what they do. Obviously, they're top tech company from China, and they're making, they're obviously very big in China. There's a very big presence there. If you've ever gone there, I've seen them. They've got stores everywhere, and of course, they're pushing out to the rest of the world to try and sell their products just like anyone else. But underpinning all of that is this notion that maybe the Chinese government's got a bit of a backdoor into everything that they're making, and they could be listening in on anyone or anything who's using their products. And that's led to maybe this dramatic arrest that happened in Canada of that top Huawei executive, and it's caused a political firestorm, with obviously the Chinese being very upset that this happened, particularly in light of the fact that Trump's gone over there and threatening tariffs and whatnot, and it's kind of unsettled things. It should be noted though that I can't remember when it happened, but didn't the Australian government ban them from the 5G space some time ago, maybe earlier this year or something, I think it was, for national security concerns? It's an interesting story nonetheless.
Well, I'm sure that before they arrested the Huawei executive, they probably checked to make sure there weren't any American executives in China. Look, once again, I can't buy into this. I don't really know enough. There's something going on, and I love a good conspiracy theory, and this is just a thin edge of a wedge kind of situation. And it's quite possible that everything they say about Huawei is true, but then it would be true for Google too, and probably most of the other, I guess, big internet companies. I mean, obviously it'd be hard to think that Facebook wasn't guilty of something. And but maybe, the difference is Facebook doesn't have a good relationship with the US government.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Isn't the distinction here that, maybe all of these tech companies are collecting information, but companies like the US-based ones like Facebook, Google, etc., they're collecting the information for their own purposes, whereas the suggestion here is that Huawei's collecting it on behalf of the Chinese government in an almost espionage capacity.
I think that's a very old-fashioned view, if you would take that, of the world, because Facebook quite clearly collected our data for their purposes and then sold it on potentially to a foreign government. So if that's what's alleged. So, I mean, really, this whole notion, I understand that there's political posturing and people are trying to do things in Washington and Beijing that we will never understand, but it's a complete furphy. That data, as we've said many, many times, you put it on the internet, it goes somewhere, somebody has it and somebody will sell it, and they'll sell it to governments, they'll sell it to rogues, they'll sell it to whoever the highest bidder is, and something will be done with it, whatever that might be.
That's right. Everyone cover up your laptop cameras. It's not just the NSA.
It's not just the NSA. And Google denies that they have a deal with the NSA, but, I have to say that, I think any reasonable person would find that hard to believe, but it may well be true. We don't know these things, and so it's all really speculation about what Huawei does with their data. It might be a smoking gun there for sure, but, really, I think in this modern age, anyone who thinks that you can use the internet and there's any form of privacy, I think it's time to build a new internet if that's what you're concerned about. Certainly, if I was a government, I wouldn't be using the internet to hide my secrets.
Absolutely. All right. So let's sidestep a little bit away from that, and we'll talk about Facebook now, because they're all. It's like they keep on coming up for all the wrong reasons. I'm sure I wonder if they've got their crack PR team trying to figure out a way to, sort of make themselves look better. But this story about Facebook, Facebook employees discussing monetizing access to personal data. Well, big surprise, as far as, but they've got documentation to show it. What I thought was interesting in here that they were suggesting was that they were whitelisting certain companies and maybe blacklisting others based on, I guess, the interaction, how much they're paying, where it's useful for Facebook to interact with them, and whether that's good for anyone really. Well, other than Facebook, of course, because it suits their purposes.
Well, look, I think we've just covered it basically. Facebook has data. It is a data company. It has highly personalised data. And thanks to the icons or emojis that they've installed over the last 4 or 5 years, it knows exactly, probably pretty much, how to trigger just about any sort of response from the wider populace. And if you had that data, that's valuable. Rightly or wrongly, you'd be crazy not to be monetizing that, because otherwise I'm not sure what the point of your business is. I will say this, though, about the whitelist and blacklist. I guess with personal data, we sort of feel that way, but Amazon is effectively doing a very similar thing, but with products and retail. If you don't go through Amazon, well, you might not really have much of a sales opportunity out there. You'll be either undercut or blacklisted and never seen. So, this is the new way. I don't think we're in a position yet to judge whether it's right or wrong, although people might have opinions. But once again, you and I have been talking about this for many years, and maybe this is where the internet's going, and maybe one day people might find that they're not so happy with the way that it's gone.
Yeah. Absolutely. Just before we move on, though, one interesting thing I find is that on this collection of data business, obviously Facebook and Google are sitting in a very similar space here, but it's interesting that Facebook is really losing out on the PR front in this case. I mean, I think everyone kind of jokingly says that Google, they know everything about you, but I don't know if I don't get that sense that there's as much of a backlash against Google as there is against Facebook.
Well, the thing about Google is that even though they do know everything about you, they've never attached it necessarily to your face. I mean, maybe if you have a Google Plus account, if you can work out how to log in, they know all about you. But Google, right from the start, and anyone who's used Google Analytics would know this, has always maintained that anonymity between a profile or a user and the end result. So Google would have very similar Facebook data to, say, Facebook. There's no question about that, and probably even better because it's more widely aggregated. But I would hazard a guess, and only hazard a guess because you've got an Android phone that's as good as having Facebook for Google. But I would hazard a guess that it's less personalised.
Yeah.
Typically, or probably in getting that data, Google's probably done a better job of segregating it. So if they ever were audited, they probably, can show that they've kept a separation, I would imagine.
And that's reflected in the public as well, I guess, public perception, in that Google is a search engine first. You go to Google to get information. Facebook, it was set up as a place to, sort of meet your friends online and stay in touch. So just on that concept alone, I guess Facebook ends up in a bit of trouble, and maybe that's where they're having problems. That maybe they're trying to become something else, and it's too difficult to stray away from what their core, I guess, reason for being is, because the two things don't compute together very well.
No, exactly. So Google's always set out to collect our data through search, and Facebook has always sought to attach us to an image. And that's a big difference, as you say.
All right. Last topic for today: emails. The thing that everyone loves and apparently wastes time on every day in the office or even just at home, sorting your inbox and whatever else is going on. This idea that are emails going to hang around, or are they destined to be, like telegrams, faxes, pages, that they're going to just disappear and not be used in the future? Maybe we're text messaging or just instantly, video calling people, or whatever it is that would replace it. And the idea that it's not a modern, I find this an ironic statement, that it's not the modern way of communicating anymore, and that it could be replaced by something better. But also from a productivity standpoint, it actually wastes a lot of people's time. If you see that inbox, I hear it in, the place in the office where I work. People have got thousands of emails in their inbox, and they feel like they can't get on top of it, or they get to the point where they have to get, Outlook to sort the most important emails for them, or like using automated shortcuts or macros or whatever it is that they're using. So is there something to that email, it's a great idea, maybe it's old, and maybe it's not as productive as what we would like it to be?
Oh, look, I think the one thing that will save email, probably the same way that Microsoft Office still exists, is purely that it's peer-to-peer. So it doesn't matter what phone you're on, what laptop, tablet, whatever your device. If it's an old beige desktop, you can still send an email. And while they're great new messaging services, inline messaging services for group work, while they're great, sort of project managing systems that everyone can go online and contribute as a team with messaging and sort of timelines and project updates, they're not universal. They're all competing models. So if I'm on one platform and you're on another, well, I'll just email you. So I think the fact is, a bit like Office, for work, we need to use a platform that is ubiquitous, i.e. anyone can use, and two, keeps a formal record. So I completely agree. 95% of all emails could just be trashed anyway, probably without an effect. But, these days you hardly write a formal letter to your boss to let them know what you're doing. So, but you might send a formal email saying, I'm about to proceed with this stage of a project, just for your information or whatever. And that keeps a formal record. So while I think that there should be a trend away from email in general to work tools, and this is why apps like Jira or Slack have become so popular, because they allow that inline messaging for work groups. They allow messages that are maybe of low importance, but they're inserted in a conversation, so they have context. And you don't have to CC 40 people. They're either in the work group looking or they're not. And that then accounts for, you either catching up very quickly or just not being part of it. So, but there is still a role for email, and it'll be there forever, as far as I'm concerned.
And I think it's actually more attached to the idea of the formal record that you've mentioned, because obviously some bright spark will come up with some new technology to create formal records at some point in the future, but it works really well as a formal record, and it's because of its ubiquitousness that I think, because anyone can use it. So anything until someone comes up with something that can replace an email that can perform that function, and it's a bit tricky to figure out why it would go away, particularly for big companies, government, that are obsessively storing everything that they document. They need to have that there, and they just can't ditch it for a messaging tool, for instance.
I guess the thing about email is it is ubiquitous, and you've got to think back to the heyday of Facebook a couple of years ago, when it seemed like everyone was on Facebook and using Facebook all the time. So around 2014. And the thing was then is, if you weren't on Facebook, you had a problem, because that was the way to stay in touch.
Yeah.
I would say now that if you were not on email, you would really struggle on a day-to-day basis.
Exactly.
And it's a bit like the web as well. The web's on a peer-to-peer universal platform, and sure, you can get different browsers, but they effectively all work the same way. It's not like somebody set up another web, that's better, although they're going to have to.
Yeah, that's right.
For privacy.
All right, Steve, we might wrap it up there. Quite interesting tech topics all around. That last one in particular is interesting. I'd love to escape emails, but I don't think it's going to happen, unfortunately. All righty. So
everyone thinks their email is the most important one.
Yeah, that's
sending.
That's right. All right, so don't forget our website, scitechculture.com. You can get all of our links and content there. You can subscribe to our YouTube, Vimeo channels and our RSS feed, so you can listen to us on your devices or wherever you happen to be. And we hope you enjoy the content on that website. All right, so that's it for this episode. We'll catch you next time.